Breaking, London has erupted once again. A fresh wave of outrage has exploded across the country tonight after Chancellor Rachel Reeves unveiled yet another brutal crackdown on Britain's motorists, sending shockwaves through Parliament, the press and the streets. Within hours, talk radio went nuclear. Bev Turner, one of the few outspoken voices left in the media willing to say what millions think but few dare to utter, tore into the government's new policy live on air. Her fury was volcanic, her words unfiltered, her tone pure disbelief. Because for many ordinary Britons, drivers, small business owners, commuters, this isn't just another political move, it's a declaration of war. Reeves called it a bold environmental step. The public called it something else entirely, a betrayal, a tax on freedom, another elitist assault from a government that no longer understands the people it governs. And as the dust settles tonight, one question echoes through the nation's airwaves. How far will this government go to squeeze the last drop from those who built this country? It began quietly, buried deep within a bland Treasury statement that most journalists dismissed as routine. A few lines of jargon about climate alignment and urban compliance. But within 24 hours, those lines became headlines. Rachel Reeves had signed off on one of the harshest transport crackdowns in British history. A sweeping plan that would hammer motorists with new congestion penalties, eco-compliance levies and expanded clean air charges stretching far beyond London, reaching towns, villages and rural roads that had never seen a single traffic camera. The fury was instant. Social media exploded with disbelief. Lorry drivers, taxi unions, delivery workers, they all saw what was coming. They're strangling us, one driver said. They want to make us prisoners in our own cars. And then came Bev Turner. Her morning broadcast didn't just echo the outrage. It became the voice of it, with a mix of moral rage and weary exhaustion. She dismantled the government's narrative line by line. They say this is about saving the planet, she thundered. But what planet are they saving when families can't even afford to drive to work? Her words struck like a hammer. By midday, clips from her show were flooding X, YouTube and TikTok. Within hours, hashtag motorist revolt was trending across the UK. The fury wasn't confined to one side of the political spectrum. It united them all, left, right and centre. Everyone felt the same burn of betrayal. Reeves had promised growth with fairness. Instead, the government had unleashed another wave of economic punishment disguised as moral progress. In Downing Street, aides scrambled. Labour strategists tried to spin it as a step toward modernisation, claiming Britain must move with the times. But people weren't buying it. They'd heard this tune before from ULE zones, from low traffic neighbourhoods, from endless fines dressed up as virtue. The difference this time was the scale and the symbolism. Reeves wasn't just tightening the screws. She was turning the car into a political weapon. Bev Turner saw that immediately. Her words cut through the fog of government jargon. They're not targeting pollution, they're targeting control. She spoke of how ordinary people were being cornered, how the elites in Westminster glide past the pain they cause, cushioned by chauffeurs and taxpayer-funded fleets. They'll never understand what it feels like, she said, voice breaking with conviction. They'll never know what it's like to choose between petrol and food. By evening, the backlash had reached Westminster. Conservative MPs smelled blood. Nigel Farage posted a single sentence on X. Reeves just handed us the next election. Within hours, hashtags like #Reeves Rebellion and #Tax to Death trended across the country. Talk shows buzzed, call-in lines crashed. It wasn't just anger. It was humiliation. A nation that once built the world's automotive empire was now being told that driving itself was immoral. Inside the Treasury, insiders described chaos. Civil servants leaked memos suggesting Reeves had ignored internal warnings about mass public backlash. Some said she had been urged to delay. Others claimed she had pushed ahead for the one simple reason: money, billions in projected revenue from fines and fees, disguised beneath layers of green rhetoric. It's about control, not carbon, said one whistleblower. Every time a driver pays, the government smiles. The story grew darker by the hour. Reports emerged of private briefings between Reeves and a handful of corporate investors connected to new transport compliance tech, automatic licence tracking, digital tolling systems, real-time vehicle monitoring. It wasn't just a policy, it was an infrastructure of control. A future where every mile driven would be recorded, taxed and sanctioned. We're not talking about clean air, Bev warned. We're talking about the end of personal mobility as we know it. And yet, even as her words echoed across the airwaves, the government doubled down. Rachel Reeves appeared on a BBC panel, smiling faintly as she insisted the changes were for the good of our children. The audience booed. The clip went viral within minutes. For the first time since taking office, the Chancellor looked rattled. But behind the calm expression, something else was stirring, a quiet defiance, a belief that she could outlast the outrage. What she didn't see, or refused to see, was how deep the resentment ran. This wasn't just about cars, it was about control, class and trust, about a government that had stopped listening and a people who were finally beginning to shout. As Bev Turner ended her broadcast that night, her final words sent a chill through millions watching online. They think we'll just take it, they think we'll stay silent, but they've forgotten who really keeps this country moving. And then, silence. A silence heavier than words, hanging over a nation on edge. Because somewhere between those headlines and those speeches, a line had been crossed. Now the question is, how far will Britain let this go before the backlash turns into rebellion? What happens when the people who drive the country decide to stop? And what secret was Rachel Reeves warned not to reveal before signing off this controversial plan? By the following morning, Britain no longer felt like itself. Petrol stations turned into protest zones. Drivers hung banners from overpasses, "We've had enough." Farmers blocked rural junctions, vans circled city halls blaring their horns, and London's ring roads turned into moving demonstrations. The footage looked less like a traffic jam and more like a civil uprising on wheels. The rebellion had begun, not led by politicians, not even by activists, but by ordinary people who'd finally decided that silence was surrender. News anchors tried to keep pace, but the situation was slipping beyond control. Government spokespeople spoke of misinformation, but every attempt to explain only made things worse. Reeves's policy document, once dismissed as routine, was now being dissected on live television, and what the public saw shocked them. Hidden clauses allowing for expanded vehicle data collection and automatic compliance enforcement. Legal language that to the ordinary citizen read like the blueprint for a surveillance state. "We thought they were taxing pollution," one caller told LBC. Turns out they're tracking people. Bev Turner, now the face of the backlash, returned to the airwaves with the intensity of someone who knew she'd struck a nerve. Her voice trembled with anger, but beneath it was a calm sense of purpose. "They've crossed the line," she said, "and the British people have noticed." She played clips of Reeves's interviews, her evasive answers, her calculated smiles. She didn't need to editorialise. Reeves's own tone betrayed her. The government had underestimated the emotional weight of driving in Britain. The car to millions isn't luxury, it's identity, it's work, freedom, escape. And now it was being turned into a symbol of control. In Parliament, tension boiled. Senior ministers privately accused Reeves of political suicide. Even Labour backbenchers whispered rebellion. Anonymous letters circulated warning Starmer's office that the new law could ignite a populist revolt. One aide allegedly told a reporter, "Rachel thought this would make her look strong. Now she looks like the woman who woke the sleeping giant." By evening, something extraordinary happened. Police officers in several towns refused to enforce the new road charges. Quietly, respectfully, they stepped back, claiming they lacked operational clarity. But the message was unmistakable. Even law enforcement had doubts. Video spread of officers standing by as angry drivers tore down new eco-compliance signs. The clips went viral, gathering millions of views within hours. That same night, a convoy of hundreds of cars left Birmingham, engines roaring through the night towards Westminster. Drivers waved Union Jacks, headlights flickering in unison, a rolling message to those in power. "We are not your subjects. The symbolism was electric. This was more than protest. It was defiance wrapped in patriotism. A reminder that Britain still had a pulse and that ordinary citizens could still command attention. At number 10, panic quietly took hold. Downing Street insiders described tense emergency meetings between Starmer, Reeves and security advisors. They spoke in hushed tones about containment, about public optics. Reeves was reportedly advised to apologise. She refused. Instead, she prepared for battle. If we give in now, she told colleagues, we'll lose control of the narrative. But what she didn't realise was that the narrative was already gone, stolen by the roar of engines and the voice of Bev Turner echoing across every frequency. Meanwhile, leaks continued. A memo emerged, signed weeks before the announcement, suggesting that the Treasury knew full well how unpopular the policy would be. One line stood out in bold. Oh, expect civilian unrest in response to perceived overreach. The public saw it as proof of betrayal, proof that the pain was premeditated. Reeves's credibility began to collapse. Bev Turner read the memo live on air. Her tone dropped to a whisper, the kind that cuts deeper than any shout. They knew, she said. They planned for the anger. They expected the chaos, but they did it anyway. Her audience fell silent. Across the nation, the outrage took a darker turn, from protest to something closer to vengeance. As midnight approached, thousands gathered outside Parliament Square. Candles flickered against a skyline of flashing lights. It was peaceful, but volatile. Among the crowd were taxi drivers, nurses, builders, pensioners, all united by a single feeling: enough. Some carried placards reading, Reeves must go. Others simply held their car keys in the air, a silent message of resistance. Inside Westminster, Rachel Reeves looked out from her office window. The sound of chanting echoed faintly through the glass. For the first time, her confidence faltered. Advisors urged her to go public, to reframe the message. She hesitated because deep down, she knew what Bev Turner and millions had already realised. This wasn't about climate or fairness or policy. It was about power. And in Britain, when power forgets humility, history has a way of reminding it. Now, rumours are spreading of a secret crisis meeting between Reeves, Starmer and the King himself. A royal intervention, unthinkable, yet whispered across every newsroom. Could the Crown be preparing to step in? Could the monarchy itself become entangled in this modern rebellion of the roads? Because if the King speaks, if he dares to break silence, the government's entire house of cards could collapse overnight. But what exactly did Reeves tell the King behind closed doors, and why was one senior Treasury official suddenly removed hours after that meeting ended? Could this revolt be the spark that brings down the entire government? By dawn, Britain stood at the edge of something it hadn't felt in decades. Real, trembling uncertainty, the kind that makes every radio bulletin sound like a warning. The motorist rebellion had grown beyond anything Westminster imagined. It wasn't just car horns and protest banners anymore. It had become a question of legitimacy, of who truly governs this country when the governed stop obeying. In those tense morning hours, word began to leak, first through whispers, then through every headline. King Charles had summoned Rachel Reeves to Buckingham Palace. The story spread like wildfire. It wasn't official, not yet confirmed, but the timing was too perfect, too explosive to dismiss. The Prime Minister's office refused to comment, and that silence only deepened suspicion. Because in British politics, when the palace calls unexpectedly, something seismic is shifting beneath the surface. Bev Turner, live on air, could barely contain the urgency in her voice. If this is true, she said, it means the King has seen enough. For millions listening, her words hit like a jolt of electricity. The monarchy had remained quiet through scandal after scandal, policy after policy, but now, in the face of open rebellion, perhaps even the Crown felt the tremors. Behind closed doors, sources described a meeting colder than frost. Reeves arrived pale but defiant, clutching folders filled with notes and talking points. The King, calm but visibly unsettled, spoke softly of duty, of the pain ordinary citizens felt, of the moral obligation of government to listen, not lecture. The Crown must not rule, he said, but nor can it stand by while the nation fractures. Reeves defended her policy as necessary, modern, inevitable. But Charles interrupted her once, his tone uncharacteristically sharp. Necessary, he repeated, is not always just. That line would later leak through a palace insider, igniting a storm. Commentators called it the sentence that shook Westminster. Within hours, MPS were openly debating whether Reeves could survive. Her authority was bleeding out in real time. Even her allies were growing quiet, fearful of being dragged into the wreckage. Meanwhile, outside, the protests swelled into something almost cinematic. Caravans of drivers encircled Parliament Square, engines revving in rhythmic defiance. Drone footage filled every network, red lights stretching like veins through the capital. The sound was haunting, like a national heartbeat refusing to stop. Across the country, smaller towns joined in. Manchester, Bristol, Newcastle. Entire high streets turned into convoys. People honked their horns, not out of rage, but solidarity. A sound of unity against arrogance. Then came the breaking point. Late that afternoon, a classified memo from the Treasury was leaked to the Telegraph. It confirmed what many feared. Reeves's policy had been pushed through despite overwhelming opposition within her own department. It also mentioned a coded term, Project Stallion. Within minutes, conspiracy theories exploded online. Some claimed it was the internal name for the new surveillance network Reeves planned to roll out nationwide. Others said it was far worse, an economic scheme to privatise road data and sell it to foreign investors. Bev Turner didn't speculate. She read the memo line by line, live, letting the silence between sentences speak louder than any commentary. Project Stallion, she repeated. They really couldn't make it up. By evening, Downing Street was besieged by journalists. Cameras lined Whitehall. Inside, aides whispered that Starmer himself was furious, convinced Reeves had dragged the government into an uncontainable scandal. But firing her now, in the middle of national unrest, would look like surrender. Doing nothing, however, looked like complicity. Every move was a trap. Then, at 9:47 p.m, a statement appeared on the royal family's official site. Just a few lines, no preamble. His Majesty the King has expressed concern regarding the social and economic divisions caused by recent policy developments. He urges all leaders to act with wisdom and humility in restoring unity and trust across the nation. That was all it took. 4 sentences, but to a country on edge, it felt like a thunderclap. The monarchy had spoken, not politically, but morally, and in that moment, the government's narrative shattered. Because no matter how powerful the Chancellor or Prime Minister might be, the people still listen when the Crown breaks its silence. The reaction was immediate. Labour MPs began calling for a suspension of the transport policy. The markets wobbled. And outside Westminster, a cheer erupted, a sound not of triumph but relief. For the first time, the rebellion had been heard. Rachel Reeves appeared later that night on national television, her eyes dark with exhaustion. She tried to sound steady. The government has listened, she said, and we will review elements of the plan. But it was too late. The trust was gone. Every word rang hollow. Even as she spoke, social media lit up with clips of Bev Turner's furious monologue replayed under the caption, "The people won't forget." Within 48 hours, the Chancellor's office was sealed. Advisors resigned. Protesters cleared the roads, but not their anger. Britain, though quieter, felt permanently changed. More awake, more suspicious, more alive. And as dawn broke over a weary London, Bev Turner sat in her studio once more, voice steady, tone sombre. "We didn't win a war," she said. "We reminded them who they work for." Her words hung in the air like prophecy. Because even now, whispers linger that Project Stallion was never truly abandoned, only delayed, renamed, buried deeper. So what was it really? A misguided policy or a glimpse of something far darker behind the facade of governance? And if the Crown had to intervene this time, what happens next time when the people rise again and no one listens?